One of the most popular swimming spots in Central Texas remains closed for swimming. Jacob's Well has not been open for nearly a year.
You might think you know what danger looks like. You expect it to have teeth or a warning sign or at least a sinister soundtrack. But in the Texas Hill Country, danger looks like paradise. There is a hole in the ground here filled with water so clear it looks like liquid glass, but do not let that fool you. For decades, locals whispered that this place was bottomless, a portal to another world that only goes one way. But when a high-tech robot finally descended into the darkness to find the boys who never came home, it found something else entirely. It turns out, the Earth here isn't just a cave, it is a trap waiting to be found. The machine that eats divers. Jacob's Well is deceptive. From the surface, it looks like a simple swimming hole, a 12-foot wide circle of deep blue water surrounded by sun-bleached limestone. It sits there under the hot Texas sun inviting you in. Kids jump off the rocks, families have picnics, and the vibe is pure summer joy. But if you put on a mask and look down, the feeling changes instantly. You are staring into the throat of the earth. This is one of the longest underwater caves in Texas, a jagged scar that plunges vertically into the darkness. For years, people treated it like a playground, but the geology down there is actively hostile. What most people don't realize is that the well is divided into chambers, like the levels of a video game, but with 0 extra lives. The first chamber is easy, a straight drop down to 30 feet. The sunlight still reaches here, dancing on the algae-covered walls. It feels safe. It feels manageable. But then you hit the restrictions. To get to the second chamber, you have to squeeze through a narrow funnel. The light starts to fade. The water temperature drops to a constant chilling 68 degrees. By the time you reach the third chamber, the surface is a distant memory. You are 80 feet underground, surrounded by loose gravel and silt that has been piling up for thousands of years. But here is the catch. The real horror story starts at the entrance to the fourth chamber. This is the spot that separates the tourists from the legends and the living from the lost. The entrance is tight, barely wide enough for a human body. And the floor isn't solid rock. It is made of unstable, shifting gravel. For decades, divers thought this was just debris, but the drone footage revealed that this gravel acts like a fluid. It is a natural quicksand mechanism. If you disturb it, the rocks don't just roll, they slide in a massive, suffocating sheet. This detail is crucial because it explains the mystery of the sealed room. When a diver pushes through, their fins kick up the gravel. The floor rises up behind them, effectively sealing the door they just came through. They aren't just lost in a cave, they are locked in a vault by the earth itself. This geological trap is what makes the well so terrifying. It is not a monster or a ghost, it is physics. The pressure down there is immense, crushing the air in your lungs and the neoprene of your suit. And the silence? It is absolute. The only sound is the rhythmic hiss of your regulator and the beating of your own heart. It is a place where human beings do not belong, yet we keep trying to conquer it. And that hubris, that desire to see what is around the next corner, is exactly what the well uses against us. It lures you in with clear water and wide passages, then tightens the noose when it is too late to turn back. The siren song of the 70s. To really understand the weight of this tragedy, we have to go back to 1979. It was a different era. The sport of cave diving was still in its infancy, a wild west where the rules were written in trial and error. Equipment was heavy, primitive compared to the sleek tech we have today. There were no high-powered LED lights that could turn night into day. There were no redundant computer systems to calculate your gas mixture in real time. Just heavy steel tanks, rubber hoses, and guts. In the late 70s, diving was about exploration. It was about pushing the limits. And Jacob's Well was the ultimate prize. It was the Everest of Texas diving. Everyone knew about the first 2 chambers. Many had seen the third, but the fourth chamber, that was the unknown. It was the Virgin Cave, the blank spot on the map. And for a certain type of person, a blank spot on a map is an itch that has to be scratched, no matter the risk. Kent Maupin and Mark Brasher were those types of people. They were young, just 20 years old, strong, fit, and full of that specific kind of invincibility that you only have when you haven't seen the world break yet. They were friends, dive partners, and adventurers. They had dived the well before. They knew the layout of the upper sections. They knew the temperature. They knew the currents. But they had heard the stories about the restrictions. They knew that to get deeper, they would have to do something dangerous. But here's the thing about cave diving. It is addictive. The feeling of floating in the void, weightless, exploring a place that has been dark for millions of years provides a rush that is hard to match. It is a mix of adrenaline and zen. But that rush can be blinding. It can make you ignore the red flags. It can make you look at a narrow, gravel-filled hole and see an opportunity instead of a grave. The Descent of the Lost Boys. They stood at the edge of the well on a humid September night. The crickets were chirping, the air was thick and warm, the water looked inviting, glowing faintly under the moonlight. They geared up, they checked their regulators, they strapped on their tanks. The plan was simple. Get in, push deep, see the bottom, and get out. It is the same plan every diver has. But as any veteran of the deep will tell you, a simple plan in a cave is usually a recipe for disaster. They made a critical mistake before they even touched the water. They didn't run a continuous guideline. In cave diving, a guideline is your lifeline. It is a thin nylon rope that you tie off at the entrance and unspool as you go. It is your breadcrumb trail. If your lights fail, if the silt kicks up and blinds you, if you get disoriented in the twisting rock, you can feel the line and follow it home. Without it, you are just guessing. And in a maze of pitch-black limestone, guessing is a fatal error. They descended into the blue glow. They passed the 30-foot mark, leaving the surface world behind. A friend of theirs, Joe Moy, was with them for the first part of the dive. He watched them go. He saw them move with confidence, their fins kicking in rhythm. They reached the restriction of the fourth chamber. The opening was tight. It was a jagged crack in the rock, filled with that loose, deceptive gravel. It was so narrow that Kent and Mark couldn't fit through with their tanks on their backs. Most people would turn around right there. That is the rational response. The cave is telling you no. The geometry is telling you stop. But they didn't stop. They took their tanks off. Just think about that for a second. They are 100 feet underwater, miles from fresh air, and they voluntarily detached their life support to push it ahead of them into a dark, rocky hole. They were no-mounting, a technique that is dangerous even for experts. It requires immense calm and precise control. If you drop the tank, you die. If the regulator gets snagged, you die. Joe saw them wiggle into the darkness. He saw the beams of their lights cutting through the gloom, illuminating the particles in the water like dust motes in a sunbeam. He knew this was wrong. He felt it in his gut. He took his dive knife and banged on his steel tank. Clang, clang, clang. The sound is sharp and metallic underwater. It travels fast and loud. It is the universal signal to abort, to turn back, to get the hell out of there. But the boys didn't turn around. Maybe they didn't hear it over the sound of their own breathing. Maybe they were too focused on the tunnel ahead. Or maybe the pull of the unknown was just too strong. They kept pushing inch by inch, sliding their bodies over the gravel, pushing their tanks ahead until their fin tips disappeared into the black. Then silence. Joe waited. He hovered in the third chamber, his own breath loud in his ears. He shined his light at the hole, waiting for a return signal. A thumbs up, a flicker of light, anything. But the well was still. The water was motionless. Then a cloud began to form. It wasn't smoke, it was silt. Silt is the enemy of the cave diver. It is fine sediment, like talcum powder or flour. When it gets disturbed, it hangs in the water, turning the crystal clear visibility into a wall of milk. You can't see your hand in front of your face. Your powerful lights just reflect back at you, blinding you further. The silt cloud meant one thing. There had been a struggle. The boys were kicking. They were thrashing. They were fighting against the rock. And then the cloud grew thicker, filling the entrance, sealing the visual connection. They were gone. The trap snapped shut. We have to talk about what happens when the trap snaps shut. The panic that sets in when you are trapped underwater is not just fear, it is a physiological storm. It is primal. When Kent and Mark realized they couldn't back out, their heart rates would have skyrocketed. In a tight restriction, you can't turn around. The tunnel is too small. You have to back out blindly, moving your feet first, feeling for the opening. But remember the weird detail, the gravel. As they kicked to back out, their fins would have dug into the loose floor. The gravel would have shifted. Instead of providing traction, it would have flowed like a liquid. It would have piled up behind them, creating a wedge. The more they kicked, the more the gravel filled the space between their bodies and the exit. It locked them in place. At 100 feet down, the physics of gas consumption changes. The deeper you go, the more air you consume with every breath because the air is compressed. Stress makes you breathe faster. Panic makes you hyperventilate. They were burning through their supply at double or triple the normal rate. Carbon dioxide began to build up in their blood. This is the silent monster. CO2 buildup causes confusion, dizziness, and a feeling of impending doom. It makes you feel like you are suffocating even if you still have air. It creates a feedback loop of terror. They were trapped in the dark, unable to move, watching the needle on their pressure gauges drop toward zero. The silence of the cave would have been deafening. Just the sound of their own desperate breathing, faster and faster, until it stopped.